Warning! This podcast contains spoilers for wonderful Tales of the Jedi. Folks, if you don't want to be spoiled from that stuff, watch yourself. Be careful. We're stepping out of the airlock and into a galaxy far, far away to discuss Tales of the Jedi, which I'll be flat out had me crying at the end.
Yeah, I think
had me crying.
I think Dave Filoni has spoken about how the tone, even though it's animated, you just have to be aware you're going into this, you're going to cry, it's going to get rough, it's going to be emotional. And they said some of that, was impacted by COVID and the tone of things. I think they were creating this along the same time as The Mandalorian, so it's really interesting to see that juxtaposition.
Oh, man.
And I mean, wow, this is Dave with like full creative freedom. He is getting to add characters, context and depth and moments to these characters from the prequel era, from these stories that he loves to tell. We're back to the Clone Wars animation style, and each episode is just absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah, I don't... Obviously, this is George Lucas's world. This is George Lucas's story. The prequels, the fall of the Republic, the Clone Wars. Those are his sandboxes that he's had banging around in his head since, late 60s or 70s.
Yeah.
But for my money, the reason that period of galactic history has the emotional depth, the tragic depth that it has, is because of Dave Filoni and these tales.
George knows
which
that.
I agree with you. And these tales, which span the birth of Ahsoka Tano to her escape from Order 66, which give us a different kind of view of the Jedi deliberations, the Jedi Council, Count Dooku in particular, are just incredible. Incredible. Like to make a flat-out villain like Dooku. You know what I mean? You watch Clone Wars, you're like, this is a bad guy. And, of course, the novelizations have done a lot of work in this regard with Dooku, who was a rich kid, had a very complex upbringing, came from a very different kind of place that many of the Jedi masters did as a child of wealth and privilege, comes to it with a very different worldview. And so, but the kind of layers that Tales of the Jedi added to him, I mean, flat out, Count Dooku is making some points throughout these episodes.
This is one of my favorite kind of Star Wars stories where a creator in that world recognizes how easy it is to go on the path of the light and the path of the dark, and how it's only one decision or one small series of events. And so to have Ahsoka's path and to see how Ahsoka became the hero that she is, and then to have it juxtaposed with Dooku's path to the dark side. And actually in these episodes, specifically episode 4, we get to see his Mace Windu moment, the moment that he killed the person that truly turned him to the dark side, and it's so interesting to me because the Clone Wars always did this. So did Rebels. It builds a context outside of what we know from the main canon films and even the main canon books. It draws from some of the, what we know now as legends. It used to be the expanded universe. But I've never really seen someone use these kind of tight 15-minute long shorts as a way of basically weaving in these kind of moments and tapestries and adding to the story. I mean, the Dooku stuff, I was very interested when I heard it was mostly Ahsoka and Dooku. And then I watched it and I was like, oh, okay, I get it. This is a tragedy. It's a Sith Lord is always a tragedy. Somebody turning to the dark side is always a tragedy. And now we get to see the tragedy of Count Dooku. We get to see what drove him there. And we also get to see, very interestingly, he's not the only person who had problems with the Jedi Council. We see other people who share his issues. We see Yaddle. Big respect. Love Yaddle. Everyone loves Yaddle, But we see Yaddle. We see, Qui-Gon Jinn, who has always had a different philosophy from the Jedi Council, who for a long time, sorry, Pablo Hidalgo, I know you hate this terminology, but he was considered a grey Jedi, someone who could use both sides of the Force. Like, lots of fans wondered if that was who Qui-Gon was. So to build on this idea that Dooku was seduced to the dark side for his imagination, for his vision, for what the Jedi Council could be, for his confusion around the way that things were run, that is very interesting, and it's very much made text here. It's a really interesting selection of stories, and I feel like this is a great use of animation
Completely
to
agree.
build out these stories. And obviously it's beautifully animated. Like Clone Wars, that is an animation style that at the time was controversial, but now we're all like big fans of it. Gives us a nostalgic feel. We get to see these characters envisioned in a way that is familiar to us. You know, we're back at it anyway again with the newest season that came out recently on Disney Plus and The Bad Batch. So yeah, just great stuff.
Let's go through the episodes. Episode 1, Life and Death. We see the birth of Ahsoka Tano up through her early toddlerhood. We see her father, Nikhil, announcing the birth of his daughter to the village. The mother Pavati presents the babe to the village elder. And we know immediately, you know without having to hear anything who this child is. Then a year later, Pavati is taking her child on a hunt. She is teaching the young Ahsoka the importance of the life that is all around them, the kind of web of nature that surrounds and supports their village. The child, Ahsoka, is delighting in all of this. They hunt a Kybrooke, which they see, and in this moment that really mirrored, I think, quite consciously Bambi, the opening of Bambi.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like quite evocative of that. They track the Kybrooke. Pavati shoots it and then has Ahsoka confront the animal's death, and says, we don't be afraid of death. It's like essentially saying it's part of life. You have to learn to face your fears. And then as they're preparing to take the Kybrooke back to the village, they're interrupted by kind of saber-toothed predator. Pavati fights the animal. This goes on for some time, but eventually the villagers come to their aid, and they're shooting at this saber-tooth that then picks up Ahsoka and runs off.
Peace. It's gone.
Peace. It's gone into the night. The cat takes Ahsoka back to its lair, which is littered with bones, and the cat is kind of like leaning in for the kill, we think, but also is very curious about the child. And Ahsoka is completely fearless, just touches the cat on the nose, and then something is exchanged. Because, of course, we understand that Ahsoka is Force sensitive. And in this moment that would have surely become legendary in this village, right?
Yeah.
Ahsoka comes riding back in the night on top of this cat as all of the villagers are just like, oh my God, what does this mean? And of course, the village elder knows what it means. It means Ahsoka is a Jedi. Just a great way to start this story.
Also, like, I love this kind of expansion of, because, there's is Ahsoka a Jedi? Well, she didn't end up becoming a Jedi, she went on her own path. But I love this idea that in some communities and cultures in the galaxy, if you are Force sensitive, you are a Jedi.
Yes,
immediately. It's what we got hints of in the end of The Last Jedi, which is like, doesn't have to be some elitist school that you must study with. If you have the Force, if you are one with the Force and the Force is one with you, you are a Jedi. And I really love that. It's a very powerful moment, and definitely like big cute baby Grogu, baby Yoda vibes with the way they animate Ahsoka. She's a beautiful little baby full of Force sensitivity. It's a really fun, kind of positive opening. And then it's just like, boom, episode 2. Sad.
Episode 2, Justice. Count Dooku, a young Jedi, and it's quite a thing to see a young Count Dooku, arrives with his apprentice, Qui-Gon Jinn, to resolve a hostage crisis on a planet. A senator's son has been taken captive. They arrive on at a grim village where absolutely no one is happy to see them there. At a local watering hole, Dooku is asking for information. Does anybody know who attacked the senator, where the senator's son is? The villagers believe that the Jedi are on the senator's side, and fairly so, right? And believe that therefore they're there as his henchmen, essentially.
Yeah, emissaries, like
Yeah,
kind of
and so
armed
and it's very
forces.
clear that they hate this senator, Senator Dagonet, whose policies you can just look around and look at the miserable state they're all in, whose policies have, turned their lives into a kind of gray hell. And it turns out, it does not take long to figure out that the entire village has conspired to kidnap the senator's son. Dooku and Qui-Gon Jinn are taken to the sun because the villagers, honestly, they want what the senator is doing to them to be known. They want it. They want it out there.
This is the point of why they kidnapped the son. And as we learn, the senator's son does not completely disagree with them.
I mean, there's some serious. You can call it Stockholm syndrome. You can call it whatever you want, but the son absolutely empathizes with the people, saying, essentially, they have a point. They have a point about, of the reason they did this. I understand it. And just as he's kind of like explaining this to Dooku and Qui-Gon Jinn, Dagonet arrives at the head of a column of troops. Dooku and Jinn go out to confront them. Dagonet didn't know that Jedis were in the area, and so he's like, "Hey, great, you're here. Arrest the villagers, and let's enact my revenge." But Dooku is like, "No, I'm going to defend them because they actually have a point. Your policies are terrible."
Yeah.
A gunfight takes place. Many of the townspeople are gunned down during it. Dagonet says, "I will destroy this town and make an example of it," and many others. And then Dooku goes. We see the darkness emerge in Dooku, who is, we're about to learn, tired of the kind of stasis of the Jedi Council
and how it props up dictators, which is essentially what
it's doing. Right?
Dagonet
how it seems certainly more concerned with its own survival as an organization, than doing justice in Dooku's mind.
They will uphold the status quo.
Yes,
to keep their place. And it's the constant question in any kind of morality tale of like the good of the few versus the good of the many. But in this case, it's very obvious that the Jedi are truly ignoring the good of the many, even though it's just one town, he said he will hurt many others. Like, this is a man who is greedy. So Dooku, chokes him out with the Force. I'm not saying he's wrong.
I'm not saying he's necessarily wrong. He's obviously playing with powers and with a side of the Force that are better left alone.
Yeah, it's one of those moments where you see, even though his intentions might be right, using the dark side of the Force is having an impact on him that will ripple out to his future.
It will pull you further and further into the dark side for sure. So Qui-Gon Jinn goes and frees the son of Senator Dagonet and is like, go out there and talk to your and explain to your father right now because my master is about to do a thing that he will regret forever. And so Dooku releases the senator, and then later he wonders to Jinn if there will ever be justice in the galaxy because things are just kind of like there's so much corruption, there's corrupt senators clearly, and this is I found this to be a very trenchant idea, like. When at what point, obviously it makes sense. You don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good, right? Like if you have something that's pretty good, you can reform it, but you don't need to scrap the entire thing and start over. And that is the place where Dooku finds himself philosophically. Can we even reform if the Jedi are just here to protect the status quo, or do we need to tear the whole thing up? And we'll obviously we understand where Dooku goes because of the prequels, and we see that journey here. Episode 3, Choices. It's years later. Mace Windu and Count Dooku are on a mission. There's been an attempt on a senator's life on Raxus, and a Jedi Master, Ketri, has died defending the senator. Mace wants to play by the rules and not get involved in local politics. We're just going to come here, we'll do our job, and leave. And Dooku, obviously, is like, well, something unjust has happened here, right? We should figure out what it is. Should we not investigate? Dooku and Mace are taken to see Senator Larrick. Larrick says that the rebels, some rebels had contacted, some separatists had contacted him, which is why he returned to Raxus. He wants peace. And then Larrick says that he and Katri went to meet an informer who was going to tell them about this kind of movement that was burbling, and that's when they were attacked. Immediately, the Jedi realize that Larrick is hiding something. Mace wants to say, okay, well, let's just do our business here, and then we'll go back and we'll inform the council about what we've learned. Whereas Dooku is like, no, this senator is lying. We need to figure out what he's lying about. We're here. We should do it. The Jedi and the senator go to the attack site that Senator Larrick leads them to, and he tells his story. There were multiple attackers. They ambushed from the woods. They were shooting at me, but of course the story doesn't add up. And suddenly Larrick runs away from them, and the guards gun him down. They realize that it was the guards who were involved. Attack droids appear. There's a big fight. Jedis handle it easily. And eventually what we learn is here is another corrupt senator who's been exploiting his people. And the people had captured him with the intent of forcing him to enact more favorable legislation, more friendly legislation, more generous legislation that will actually benefit his constituents into the Senate. And for this reason, they don't trust the Jedi. They say the Jedi claim peace, but they only keep law and order for the rich and powerful. And this is something that really resonates with Dooku, who ironically, and maybe because of his background as a rich kid, it really resonates with him.
Mm-hmm. He sees the truth in it. He sees the truth in it, and it's a perfect follow-up to what we already saw, where he's seen this. And we can imagine over the intervening years that Count Dooku has seen many corrupt, wealthy people who are not looking after their towns, who are not looking after their constituents. We've seen it in many different Star Wars stories. It's the nature of the 1%, of the way that people stay rich. The idea that there cannot be a good billionaire, because if you were a good person, you would never need $1 billion. You would have given much of it away before you ever became a billionaire. So it's a really interesting thing. And obviously, again, for Dooku, this is another one of those sliding door moments or ripple moments where his divisions with what he sees as the right thing to do get further and further away from the Jedi.
Mace wants Dooku to explain himself to the council. Dooku, meanwhile, wants to know from Mace, do you agree with the direction that the Jedi are going in? Do you agree with what we're doing? It's that conversation is unresolved until years later. After the funeral, Mace gets the late Master Catress's council seat and promises to speak to the council about Dooku's concerns. Whether that ever happens, unclear. I want to say, I think The Last Jedi got a lot of shit for among many other things that were not legitimate. This is more of a taste thing, was Luke's cynicism about the Jedi and their mission. And one of the great contributions, honestly, of Filoni's work in this area is an understanding of just how imperfect, how flawed, how deeply flawed the Jedi as an organization have been.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I wrote an article, one of my favorite articles at Nerdist after The Last Jedi came out, about one of the things that resonated the most to me, which was we talk a lot about the rule of two and the Sith and this kind of horrific idea that there can only ever be one Sith and one apprentice, and when one Sith Lord, basically you have to kill someone to gain power. But nobody ever really talks about the fact that the Jedi is arguably a very abusive space where they train children from birth.
Steal them from
their
their
parents.
Steal
them from their families, don't save the families, leave their families in slavery, then train them to kill, to be, to not have any feelings, to not love, to not hate. And in many cases, it is the relationship between the Jedi, the Padawan, and their master that enables somebody to corrupt them into the dark side. And I felt like The Last Jedi did such a great job of exploring that and looking at the way that Rey breaks that cycle when she won't take Kylo's hand, you know? So I think it's really a great point that you made, that a lot of that was actually seeded by the deeper exploration of these things in long-form storytelling by Dave Filoni in the Clone Wars, in the Expanded Universe, of course, in the books, because there you have time to see all these different perspectives. And that's why, you know, people used to complain about the prequels and be like, oh, it's too much bureaucracy. Who wants to know about space politics? Like, there's too much talking about trading routes. But now, you know, 25 years later, 30 years later, you have Andor, which is a very talky show all about the interior politics. And people who grew up on the prequels are just like, wow, this is actually something that speaks to me. This is the conversations that we want to have. It's not black and white. It's not, this is a morally complex situation with a clear bad guy, but also the good guys aren't always doing the best job for the people at the bottom.
I mean, maybe it's just because I watched them back to back, but Tales of the Jedi and Andor feel very much of a piece to me. Obviously, covering very similar periods of time,
visually, like vibesy,
but
definitely.
It felt of a piece. One, you know, from a more adult / you know, air quotes, mature perspective. Another one from a more, you know, obviously it's animated, more traditional Star Wars perspective, but both dealing with this kind of tragedy of the loss of democracy and institutional decay, etc. Episode 4, The Sith Lord. It's the early days of the Separatist conflict. Dooku arrives at the Jedi Temple. He slips into the archives using a code associated with Master Sifo Dyas. Dooku then erases Dooku then erases all records dealing with the planet Camino. Of course, we know that Sifo Dyas was the name on the receipt for the millions of clone troopers purchased from the genetic scientists on Camino. Clearly, Dooku, we can surmise from this, is working with Palpatine at this point and is working to cover any kind of connections, cover the tracks between Sifo Dyas and the planet Camino. Jocasta Nu, keeper of the archives, tells Dooku that Dooku's apprentice, Qui-Gon Jinn, has encountered a Sith Lord somewhere on the Outer Rim, and this is big news.
Dun, dun, dun.
You know, the Jedi Temple is abuzz with, oh my God, a Sith Lord, a Sith Lord. Jinn and Yaddle go to address the council. Dooku stops them on their way in and wants information about this Sith Lord, about the attack. And the attack happened on Tatooine. Jinn is sure it was a Sith Lord. Yaddle, meanwhile, is, you know, a product of the kind of Jedi thinking of the day. She says, like, we shouldn't raise the alarm about this. Let's not fly off the handle. In fact, let's not spring into action at all until we know more. We need to investigate more. We need to look into this more, which is the sadly unfortunate line from Yoda on down of the Jedi Council during this time was, well, look into it. We need to look into it. Let's look into it. Let's continue to look into it. Yeah. They will never, of course, learn more about this. Later, Dooku meets Yaddle in the gardens. This is sometime later. And he's talking about how he used to bring his apprentice, Qui-Gon Jinn, here to see the tree because Jinn was a city kid from Coruscant and had never seen a tree this size. And we understand now that Jinn is dead. He lost his life, of course, at the hands of Darth Maul. Yaddle trails Dooku across Coruscant because she's kind of suspicious at the way that Dooku has been acting lately. And she trails him to an industrial rundown section of Coruscant, and she sees him meeting with a hooded figure. We know this is Palpatine. We hear them arguing. Dooku believes the senator has gone too far. To whatever his schemes have been, surely Dooku agreed with them in principle, but he never imagined that someone so close to him, Qui-Gon Jinn, his apprentice, who he clearly had very, very deep feelings for. Which is like such a melancholic, sad wrinkle to all of this, is seeing the effect of Qui-Gon Jinn's death on Dooku.
Yeah, and also as well, that links back to this kind of symbiotic, codependent, abusive in some ways because of the systematic nature of the Jedi.
Yeah.
The kind of these unbelievably intense relationships that these people get into, and then when somebody is killed, where is the support for that? What is the fallout from that?
Yeah.
And we get to really see that here. Like, we knew the canon of who, you know, Qui-Gon Jinn's master had been, but like, this is a moment of getting to see him in all his humanity and feeling the loss, rather than just, as Jason said earlier, like a big bad, you know?
It's a much warmer relationship than I think that anybody expected.
Yeah.
Just from Dooku's reaction.
Absolutely.
And it's so malevolent and perverse the way Palpatine uses that pain to draw Dooku deeper in. So Yaddle confronts them, and she says, listen, Dooku, whatever has gone on to this point, join me now. We can deal with all of that later. Join me now. Let's stop Palpatine. Palpatine, meanwhile, says, listen, you want to, the Senate is corrupt. We know that. Like, that's a truth. You are never going to cleanse the corruption of the Republic with Yaddle, and the rest of the Jedi, who are just here to protect the status quo. Stay true to me, and together we will bring down the corrupt Senate. There's a fight. Dooku seemingly crushes Yaddle with this huge, like, metal bay door. Palpatine fucking loves it. He's like, this is great. You've proved you're loyal to me. But, of course, Yaddle is still alive. She managed to stop the door. Bone-chilling, incredible moment when Yaddle is still alive.
Brilliant moment, and you're just like, oh, my God, this is it. This is the Yoda moment. This is the comeback. This is the Force. But sadly, as we know, both, you know, Yaddle and Dooku's fates that we've kind of gleaned, we know that that's not going to last for long. But it's such a great moment when she pushes up the door with the Force.
But the exertion leaves her very vulnerable and weak. Dooku, you know, Palpatine is like, you have to finish the job. That's how I'll know you're loyal to me, and then we can bring down the Republic together. And Dooku says the thing that is motivating him. I only want to bring peace and order to the galaxy.
Always ends badly, that wish.
Yeah, it always does. You know, to his, in fairness to him, he sees quite clearly how the bureaucracy and corruption of the Senate is really is working against justice. That said, this is not the way to do it. But of course, Dooku's too far gone now. He strikes down Yaddle, and
that's
Palpatine
the moment.
is
That's
delighted.
the moment that you are committed to the dark
That's
side.
it. There's no coming back from that.
I know, and the thing I find so heartbreaking is, like, they do such a good job here where you really get to see that Yaddle is morally aligned with Dooku in some ways, and Yaddle,
she's like, I agree
like,
with you.
It's true. This sucks. And also, she's like, I love this. This is one of the moments I found strongest, where she said, "It doesn't matter what you've done in the past. If you make the right choice now,
do it now. Yeah,
that is all that matters. Is that you make the right choice. You come with me, and we make this right." That is so. You want him to take that option so badly. And yet you know it's not going to happen.
I found myself wondering, had Jin lived, would Dooku have gone all the
way
down this path?
I feel like that's what this episode wants us to
to really understand that was that's the
final straw.
That was the final thing that drew him even deeper, even though, perversely, it was Palpatine that caused that to happen. Episode 5, love this episode. Practice makes perfect. Clone Wars raging. Jedi Anakin Skywalker arrives late to watch his apprentice, Ahsoka Tano, go through some lightsaber training. Kenobi, Windu, and Yoda are there. Yaddle is nowhere to be seen, but of course she's dead. And you have to wonder, was anybody ever like, where the fuck is Yaddle? Like, what happened to Yaddle?
Or is it like, is the Yoda... are the Yoda species, is their tendency to just like breeze off and go and live in a swamp?
Yeah,
so
maybe
everyone's
that's
just
it
like,
too.
maybe just traveling.
Because I would love to know what the reaction to Yaddle just being gone now. Like, nobody ever asked. We watch Ahsoka go through this training with various training droids inside of a laser sphere that is steadily shrinking, and it is quite clear that she is eminently skilled. But Sky Guy doesn't like the test. He thinks, droids, they're predictable. They're not like they're not like living opponents who are random, who attack in ways that you can never expect. You need a real test. So he takes her to a hangar somewhere on Coruscant and puts her up against clone troopers led by Rex, in which they surround her and shoot stun bolts at her again and again and again and again. She's getting hit by these bolts and passing out for an hour, for another hour, again. And over time, Ahsoka gets better. She gets more immune to the stun bolts. She's getting faster. She can go minutes and minutes without getting hit, but she still does get hit. And after this, we see Rex and Ahsoka. After Ahsoka has taken the chip out of Rex, it's the night of Order 66, and we understand all that has led up to this moment that allows Ahsoka to survive Order 66 with all these blaster bolts coming at her.
Yeah.
I want to, so the concept of a Mary Sue is something that has been talked about specifically with Star Wars. It's just for the people who don't know what Mary Sue is. Mary Sue is a genre of criticism that is essentially misogynistic.
Yes.
Okay, but it is couched in these kind of academic terms, which says that basically that the power levels of a female protagonist are unearned, and they're often unearned, not just in Star Wars, but in other stories, and they're often unearned because we as a culture are kowtowing to these kind of woke elites who
inverted commas on those, of course.
Okay.
So basically the simplest way to explain it, this is what I always say, is think about the chosen one trope, Luke Skywalker, right. Harry Potter, and then if the chosen one is a woman in any story or someone who's not a cis male,
right,
they say they're a Mary Sue. It's that simple, because guess what? Luke, that bitch wasn't doing nothing. He's shooting womp rats. He didn't have no he didn't train for 3 days. His master died rather than just tell him the truth.
Zero training.
But Harry Potter, he's just living in he's living under some stairs. He'd never been trained. But I love that. Obviously, I think Ahsoka's a great example of Dave Filoni. People did critique her, but she's always been a great character with a lot of depth. But this is a really nice space of here, you want to talk about
why Ahsoka is such a badass,
and not just
here is why.
Here is why. Also, not just that. Here is what seems to be, and I was very interested to find this was one of the shorts where I saw quite a few people being this one's quite routine, it's just her training, and I was thinking
I disagree.
To me,
I completely disagree.
To me, this is this is actually incredibly deep, because what they're really saying is not only is this why she's a badass, but also here is the love that Anakin had for her. Even though he became Darth Vader, he made this one choice that seems like a simple, offhanded, almost egotistical choice, because Anakin's I know better than how the Jedi do than how to train you.
Almost too hardcore.
Yeah.
There's points where you want to be there's points where you want to be Anakin, enough.
You can see the man who's going to become Darth Vader inside the ego and the narcissism, but it is this choice, and it is this obvious training that Ahsoka clearly kept up over the years that then led to her being able to evade capture on Order 66, not just because of the training, but because of the relationship that she created. That is so powerful and cool and such a good idea.
I agree.
And also
it hit me emotionally so hard.
Right?
Because it's just it just draws a line through her training,
and her journey.
Relationship with Anakin, and the fact that is, listen, it's her ability, her skill, but a lot of that is because of what she learned from Anakin, and that being the reason that she survives is amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. And also, let's just say, we talk about this a lot when we talk about Star Wars, and we're always cracking jokes and ragging on them, but Order 66, they were pretty bad at it. And there's a lot of people where it just turns out, that Jedi survived, that Jedi survived. Yeah. This is one of the few examples where we actually really know why. We now know how Ahsoka survived, the relationships that made that possible, the skills that she learned to do it. It's very cool. And I think I like the episode anyway, because I like anything to do with Anakin and Ahsoka. I think that's such a great addition to Anakin's canon. But that final push forward to Order 66, that really just clinches it.
There's another layer to it too that I found myself thinking about, which is, because you're watching this and you're like, Anakin, stop, enough. She's passing out for an hour at a time, like, and
This is not
and
good
you
for her
just throw her
brain.
back into it. Yeah, you're just gonna throw her back into it. But a part of me wonders if some piece of Anakin, as he's being seduced by the dark side, understands that
Oh, I love
Ahsoka's
that.
going to have to face something that no one understands is coming. But
That
on
makes
some
so
unconscious
much
level,
sense. He can sense it somewhere in his heart. He knows.
he feels it coming.
He can feel that something. He doesn't know if it's Order 66,
Right.
but he knows that Ahsoka will have to fight something. Oh, that's
You're
so
gonna have to
good.
face
I
it like
love
this.
that. Something
And I couldn't
more
stop
real
thinking
than
about
droids. That is
Yeah.
such a good read.
Because why else? Why else?
Mm-hmm.
And why just her? Why not any? Like, why not say, hey, shouldn't we do this for everybody?
Yeah, let's just go grab the other trainees. Blah 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 blah.
And it's both generous and selfish.
Yes,
it's like the two sides of
absolutely.
Anakin at once. He wants this person that he loves and he cares about to have the utmost tools and skills to survive this threat that maybe he only darkly imagines coming. But also, it's that selfishness too, because he's only sharing it with her.
Yeah.
Episode 6, Resolve. We're on Naboo. After the fall of the Republic, we're watching the funeral of Princess Amidala. Bail Organa, watching the funeral procession go by, catches a glimpse of a hooded figure. It's Ahsoka Tano. He catches up to her somewhere in the city. And he tells her, you shouldn't have come here. There's nothing you could do. Ahsoka she took the risk because she wanted to pay respects to her friend. Bail gives Ahsoka a communicator, and he says, listen, if you ever want to get back into it, you need me, you want to get into the fight, call me. She says, like, that's it. I'm done fighting. My heart is broken. Everyone I know is dead. My master is dead. Everyone's gone. She slips away from the city and then out into space in a Y-Wing piloted by Rex. And then we go to a farm on some planet somewhere. It's maybe years later. We don't know. Ahsoka is living an anonymous life amongst the field hands there. And then one day she uses her powers to save a girl's life. That girl invites Ahsoka over to eat with her and her fellow workers. The workers are arguing about politics, and we see that the rise of the Empire and its power is very, very... It is a contentious subject out here, with some saying, well, the Empire, it's better, right? It's less chaotic. While others are saying, yeah, but what have we lost?
Yeah, the boot on the neck is
the boot on the neck. The girl lets Ahsoka know that she knows that she used the Force to save her life. And Ahsoka is concerned because she's thinking, maybe I have to run again. She and the girl go on a delivery run, and when they come back, they find the farm in flames. Ahsoka's been betrayed. One of the kid who is like, I love the Empire, it's great, everything's more stable now, has ratted them out, understood that Ahsoka was a Jedi, and called the Inquisitor Force. A hooded Inquisitor is about to murder Ahsoka's betrayer for essentially, like, he thinks, calling in a false alarm. But Ahsoka arrives, saves the day, easily cuts down the Inquisitors, because, of course, it does not serve Palpatine for these people to be that trained or that powerful. She takes care of him easily. And the next day, Bail Organa arrives to take the survivors away. And there's like this chilling, I just had goosebumps, where he's like, you kept the communicator? She's like, yes. And he's like, does that mean you're ready to get back in the fight? And then she thinks about it for a very, very long time and then nods very quietly. She's back in it. And it was just like, woo. Also, the scene where she is facing down the Inquisitor against the flames of the farm is absolutely incredible. And like all of this, we should add, as a setup to the Ahsoka series, is perfect. Loved it. I loved every episode. This was great.
Yeah, it's really good. And I think there's been like a lot of, I'm not sure if this is canon or not, but like, I'm not sure if it's been confirmed, but the character that she faces down with, this story is is like based on E.K. Johnson's amazing Ahsoka book. It's kind of like loosely adapted, and the character is, you know, credited as an Inquisitor, but it's like, is it the sixth brother who was in there, who's in the Star Wars comics? Because they don't say his name, you know, Disney doesn't tend to credit unless they say the name. So it's really fun to see them building in more of this non-Legends canon book stuff, which we know has shaped so much of this. And I think it's really cool to see something like Ahsoka, which a lot of fans might not have read, becoming canon into this world. It's kind of the Harlequin thing, right? Introduced in animation, becomes part of the comics, then becomes a huge fan favorite in the movies. This is like that, where it's like Ahsoka's introduced in animation, the book comes out, Ahsoka is now using that lore in the world of the animation where she was introduced. It's really fun stuff. So yeah, this was just really good. And I mean, Ahsoka is Dave Filoni's baby, and he loves her, but she is also like probably one of the most popular Star Wars characters of all time at this point. So it's really nice to see them embrace that and expand on it here in a kind of unexpected way. And this obviously feels very timely, knowing that we're going to get a live action Ahsoka. You know, so let us know more about her and learn more in this space.